So I gave a little background. I learned about this and I found it interesting. And I had an opportunity starting in the late summer to teach a CompE 180A course, which is a data structures in Python, kind of a ramp course for students doing an off-campus AI program. And so it's a little different student mix. And I said, I'm going to try some specification grading stuff and some mastery. And so that was essentially what I did. I defined 8 mastery areas, and each of them mapped directly to CLOs. And this meant that my assignments had to be laser specific. So, like, I had one assignment for building a data structure, another assignment for traversing it and doing something. Um, and I graded them simply as mastered and not yet mastered. I really wanted to use all growth mindset language, so I never use the fail word. Okay. And I had a whole bunch of things in class activities. This was a brutal class period. It was a 4 hour block of time online. And so I've divided up into 4 1 hour blocks. And then for keeping students engaged in active learning, we spent 1 hour of them coding in groups each class period. And they had to submit those things either within 15 minutes or at the end of the day. At the end. And those things could not be redone. They were there for making sure students attended and they were engaged, and that seemed to really work. I also said students needed to just show me they had this area mastered. And I always try to tie it back to this is the stuff you need for a job interview. Pay attention, you know, and that seemed to get their attention well. And so I said, exams. My exams, I was going to write them in terms of mastery areas, and they got this exam was scored mastered or not mastered for each area, and they only had to take an exam on an area they hadn't yet mastered, and nobody ended up taking an exam in the whole class. It was amazing, and we'll talk about that. So I gave them an exam option and a mastery assignment. It's important that you provide a rubric for everything and incredibly ugly instructions for everything. And so I'll give you just one example. This is one of my assignments. And you can see it's kind of drawn out. I also gave them test harnesses for most of these things, so it was easy to grade on my part. I could see if it worked or not. And then I have a rubric, and it has stuff like all of it's there. The code's original. It's got comments. It actually met the problem description, so on. Okay. And a very important thing that I found that students really loved was whenever I gave them something that it wasn't mastered, I always told them what they needed to do to meet the mastery level. And the rubrics change as you go from assignment to assignment because I'm expecting them to grow in their abilities during the semester. And I explained that up front to them. And so students really liked having very specific rubrics. And this one's got probably too many areas on it, but I put these things in because this is what a lot of them were screwing up. Many of them were giving me code that worked. I think they cut and pasted some of it off of the web or something, but they didn't comment it, they couldn't explain it, all of these things. And so I made all of those important. Now, if you say, how did I do the thing? We'll come back to that in a minute, but you'll see here that in Canvas, it's very easy to go into assignment and give us another due date. And so when the student used a token, I gave them another due date. All right. And this student was getting there very late in the semester because we're providing feedback that they're not up to passing the class. So that was basically what I did in this course in terms of mastery. Um, I call it recovery. That's not a term that was used in the training, but you need to give students a way to recover if they're not mastering the subject. And so I basically said you can redo any 3 things during the semester. They already had 2 options: demonstrate mastery by doing a mastery level on an assignment or demonstrate it on an exam. And they do not want to take the risk of doing exams, I've learned. And so I created tokens, and the token is just a term, and students have to formally request a token to use it, and they have to be ready to submit the assignment when they request it. So I only opened the assignment up for resubmission for like 2 days. And that seemed to work really well because that keeps students from just coming and saying, I need to open all 3 tokens and I'll get to it. And then they never do. And so I said, when you're ready to submit, let me know and I'll open it up for submission. And that seemed to be the best way for me to manage it. It got rid of a lot of the riffraff because once they opened a token, it only opened the assignment for typically 48 hours. That was the thing that I did. And nobody complained about that because I told them you won't get a token until you tell me you're ready to submit the assignment. How did I implement it? Because we're really talking about tokens and not just master grading. I said, well, Canvas assignments had two things. One is I had the ability in Canvas to put an assignment in that doesn't actually contribute to the grade. And so what I did was I just made a assignment, which I called tokens. All the students could see it, okay? And I just, whenever I give student a token, I decrement it by one. So I started out with 3. And let me just show you a little picture here in the grade book. So here's an example from the class. It's concluded now. And so this student used 2 of them. Nobody used all 3. That was the interesting thing. Okay. And we can come down here and see when they use tokens. Now there were a few times, this is the first time I taught the course, where I realized that they probably needed more time and I just gave the whole class an extra day. And we didn't use any tokens for that. That was me learning their capabilities as a course. But I just put the tokens in here, and then if somebody had used one, for example, I would come down here and I would just change it to a 2, and that's it. Now, setting it up wasn't very difficult. Let me put her back. Wasn't very difficult because you've got this great thing that says you can set a default grade for everything. So when I made the assignment, I came and set the default grade for the number of tokens I had, and we were there. So managing the tokens isn't too difficult. This wasn't a big class. There's 20 some students in it. Okay. Um, and they can see it and they know it's there. And I called it tokens. I'm not very creative. I'm an engineer. So let me just talk about what I found worked and what didn't. I can talk about grading. I didn't do the complex grading matrix. This course was credit, no credit. And I simply said you have to have 84% or better to get credit. And students really liked the system and the method. They really liked the fact that the assignments were very focused. You know, the off-campus program came in and did an in-person, assessment with them, and that was one of the strongest feedback points. Was they liked the fact that the assignments were terribly focused, and I wrote 2 pages for each one of exactly what they had to do. And they liked the fact that on everything that wasn't yet mastered, I gave them feedback and they felt that helped them redo the assignments and get them to the mastery level. If you tell them, what do you need to do to be mastered on this subject? And on my grading, I didn't use a partial. If you had one not mastered item on an assignment, I graded it not mastered. And so you had to have everything in the rubric checked off that you had done that. And so I feel it's important to just set that expectation and then they go there. The other thing that worked really well was whenever a student resubmitted something, Canvas notified me to go grade it. And so I didn't have to keep track of what's hanging out there and isn't there. And if the assignment closed and nothing was submitted, Canvas didn't bother me about it. And so I had one student who opened one and then didn't get around to submitting it. And then I said, well, use another token. And they said, but then I only have one left. And I said, yep, welcome to the club. That's the price of not submitting it. And that worked fine. And so I felt that worked well. What kind of stuff could have been better? Um, you've got to have a lot of student contact by email or some other way. You've got to talk to the students. It isn't something where they can go into Canvas and say, I'd like to use a token today, please. And I don't know if we'll ever get a system like that. Maybe, maybe not, but it would be a while. So basically, the students typically sent me an email. Some of them texted me because I give my cell phone number out to all my students all the time, and just text me, and then I would say it's open until this day. Um, it is a manual method. You got to manually go in and reduce the token count, and you got to manually edit the assignment and add the additional due date for that student. And that takes some time. And I used a rubric, and some of them get 0 to 30, some went 0 to 10, depends on the assignment. But I had to change the rubric scoring to a pass-fail scoring directly. Okay, so you know. Now, one of the other things that I did do in the class is that they had a project. And so the project counted for a good part of their grade. And then we had 10% of their grade was all the in-class activities and out-of-class quizzes and stuff. And they were not in the mastery system, so they weren't up for redo because I wanted them there as part of an active learning idea. You've got to be there to learn as a group and to do these things. And so that was basically how I did it. And it didn't turn out to be bad. I had good results from the students. And so my conclusion is with some effort, Canvas enables a token-based mastery grading. And you can decide where you want to do. The rubric stuff you need is there. The ability to leave feedback is there. Um, the ability to open an assignment up for one student based on selecting a token is there. It's manual. The effort's manageable in a small class of 25. I don't know if I'd want to try this in a section of 200 or something. You need TAs full time just managing the request flow. The other thing that I would point out was I had every student pass this class. And if you'd asked me on the third class period, every student class, I'd give you name of three of them I'm sure weren't going to. They weren't really participating. They some of them weren't attending, which was another problem. It was online. And so I just, when I got to the second thing due, I sent an email to everybody and I said, you've missed two and you can only make up three. And that seemed to shake all the ones I was worried about loose. And so one thing I'd kind of like to show you in the grade book is when we finish the semester, here's some of the mastery scores right here. Okay. Every single student, except for one who dropped the course, basically, this guy right here, um, mastered every single mastery assignment. It took some of them 2 tries, took one of them 3 tries. And so I felt that by the end of all that, yeah, it was more work, but that they were actually prepared to move on into the rest of the AI program. They knew Python, they knew data structures. We'd done a neural network together. We'd done all these things. And so is it a little more work? Yes, but I feel like in other systems, all I do is admire that students are failing and I can't do much about it. I don't have a way to encourage them to recover well. So my model is to change the vocabulary a little. Otherwise, Carlos and I are on the same track, right? I'm trying to have a strong growth mindset model. You're not there yet, but you will get there. Let's help you get there. And then the second thing that I like to do with all of this is to give them a very simple grading mantra, which is it's a percentage, and each mastery is a so percent. So it's easy to calculate your score. Okay, any comments or questions on what I did because it's a lot the same stuff. I'll stop the share. Okay,